So I'm going to show you guys today how I make homemade syrup for slushies or gelati. I use Lorann oils for making candy. I'm going to use watermelon for this one. I fill a quart jar about this much with water. Excuse my dirty hands, they're stained from tie-dyeing shirts, but they are clean. And then you boil the water. Then I have here about 1.5 cups of sugar. Put that in the water. Make sure you bring your water to a boil. Mix that sugar into the boiling water until it dissolves. I also add a little bit of Karo because it makes the syrup a little thicker. This I do not measure. You can put as much as you want or as little as you want. In fact, you don't even really need to, but I like to because it makes it thicker. So I just put a decent squirt in. I'd say that was probably a 1/2 cup or so of Karo. Now you want to let this boil for about, I'd say at least 3 to 4 minutes. Let it boil. Because you want it to get like halfway to what would be hard crack stage for candy. But because this has more water and doesn't boil as long, it doesn't turn into a hard candy. And then once that boils for a little bit, I will add 1 full bottle of this watermelon, and I will put a spoonful of vanilla and a little bit of pink food coloring just to give it some color. And you can put your flavoring now or when it's done boiling. I usually do it about halfway through once I start to see that this is thickening up. And if your syrup isn't getting thick, that's because it thickens as it cools. It will get a little bit thicker in the pot, and you can add a little extra sugar if you're not sure. I always end up adding just a little more sugar just because I don't use specific measurements for this. I just kind of wing it. It's kind of hard to go wrong though. You can't really mess it up as long as you're using sugar and water and boiling it long enough. And you can play with this recipe. You can use Kool-Aid packets also the same way for flavoring and any other candy flavorings like this. I prefer these because they are the strongest. So now that that's boiling for a few minutes, I'm going to add a little bit of vanilla to it. And I'm going to do about 2 spoonfuls of vanilla. And again, you can play with that. Take it to your liking, however much you want. You don't really have to add vanilla. I like to add a little bit just because it gives it a little more flavor. Now I'm going to add my bottle of watermelon candy flavoring. And this will make about 1 quart of syrup. I just use these mason jars. Once it cools down, I put it in a mason jar. And if the syrup is a little too thick once it cools, you can always add just a little bit of water to it to thin it down some. And you'll see how thick it is. I'm going to do a part 2 where I actually make, I guess you could call it a gelati. I'm going to make it like flavor ice with a little bit of vanilla ice cream in the middle. And that's also optional. You don't have to put ice cream in it if you don't want to, but I like mine with ice cream. This is also good for slushies. You don't have to make it like I do in the second part when I show you. You can make it with less ice. The more ice you use, the thicker, obviously, your flavor ice will be. And I'll show you how I do that next. Okay, so everything's good and dissolved. That's boiled for a few minutes. You can leave it go for just a minute yet. And then I'm just gonna let it cool down, and I'm gonna put it in this jar and let it cool for probably an hour or two, and then I will show you how I make the flavor ice. And again, this is good with anything. These are my favorite to use. They come in all different kinds of flavors. I have grape here and strawberry. This time I used watermelon. They have a cotton candy flavor. That one's my favorite. So you can play with this recipe. Sugar and water, boil it, put your flavor in, and it works. Just let it cool, and it'll become a syrup. So I'll be back with part 2. Thank you.